So yeah, I mean, this book was also extremely important to me as an undergraduate. Why? Because it helped me to deal with a lot of confusion I had as an undergraduate. I'd come across these structural functionalist ideas. I didn't really connect to them. I didn't like them. And then when I read Theory of Organizations, I mean, guided by Bob Fryer and David Knights, it helped me to appreciate why I had a problem with them. And it dealt with quite a lot of kind of confusion. And it also sort of joined up the dots of a lot of things that I had read and that were all in different compartments in my mind. So thanks very much indeed, David, for that. It was really, really important for me kind of getting onto the road, because prior to that, I was all over the place, probably still am. Anyway, I think the central themes and the problems of the book remain with us. And I think that's sort of come out during today. I think the book was sort of prescient and performative in the sense that it anticipated what was to come and obviously influenced what was to come. It was a bit, to my mind, a bit like Alvin Gardner's Coming Crisis in Sociology. Although David went off and did other stuff, mainly, and I'll come to that in a minute, his work connected to things that I was looking at the time, like Goldthorpe and Lockwood and so on. And the Theory of Organizations, preceded by Peace in Sociology a couple of years earlier, immediately attracted attention. Nikos Mouzelis had a pop at it. Colin Fletcher, who we touched on earlier, had a pop at it. And very soon after its publications, significant figures like Andrew Pettigrew, we've also earlier referred to Lex Donaldson, were referencing it. And I think one thing that we haven't noted today was the importance of John Child's article in 1972, where he sort of tried to integrate it or accommodate it within contingency theory. And that whole notion of strategic choice was coming, as I saw it, out of a reading of David's book. I mean, not a very persuasive reading in my view, but I had to be careful because John was my first boss. The first job I had, I was Aston, and John was head of department. But I think the two things that for me come through in that book and continued in our field is an interest, as lots of people have been saying, in terms of this kind of action, agency, and so on. I would rather frame it in terms of subjectivity. It's the presence of subjects and their subjectivity that is significant. So a quote from the book, one that I particularly like, is organizations do not react to their environment, their members do. It seems to me that sort of sums it up. And then David goes on, so people act in terms of their own and not the observer's definition of the situation. And of course, where they get their own definition or own meanings from is something that, we need to, pay attention to, because clearly they're not coming directly from those people. They're coming from interaction with others, relationships, and so on, as we've been talking about earlier. And then the second thing, I think, and something that isn't particularly developed in the book, is around power, which Catherine, stressed earlier. And in the book, David quite explicitly says the social action model, as he has it, involves an analysis of the balance of power within an organization. And then he goes on quoting Berger and Luckman, he who has the bigger stick has the better chance of imposing his definition. So it is in there. It's saying, look, we do need to pay attention to power, although arguably that isn't something that is developed particularly in the book. But within our field, evidently, it has been developed quite significantly, most notably by Stuart Clegg. The other thing that I thought was really important in the book was the critique of managerialism, which again, we haven't heard very much of today. And the sort of critique of technocracy is in there, it seems to me. He talks about, if we accept the system's goal, we are pushed inexorably towards a view inseparable from that of management. For management's problems, the survival and adaptation of the system have become our problems. So it's directly sort of challenging the sort of managerialist notions that were implicit in systems theory, it seemed to me. And that was something else that, you know, I could warm to even as an undergraduate. And it's something that, you know, has become significant in terms of so-called critical management studies. And of course, there's also in theory of organizations a critique of positivism and the notion of value neutrality. And you know, he has a direct pop at systems theory and its positivistic orientation, claims to be value free, but as he puts it lovely, he says, but it's seen to degenerate into what we may politely call value relevance. So again, I think all these elements are, you know, really interesting within theory of organization, have been continued through. The other thing I want to say is really about the reception of the book. And it's a shame that Gibson isn't with us, because I wanted to have a bit of a spat with Gibson on this in terms of how theory of organization is represented in sociological paradigms. I was slightly surprised we haven't heard more about sociological paradigms today. But as you may recall, the Burrell and Morgan have these 4 paradigms, and there's a functionalist paradigm and there's an interpretive paradigm. And they insist on placing David's theory of organizations firmly in the functionalist paradigm. I personally found that unconvincing. But the reason they do that is because the full implications of phenomenology and ethnomethodology apparently are not demonstrated in the theory of organizations. Well, I tend to agree with that. I think David was partially there, and of course that came through in later projects, new directions in social theory we've already referred to, but also problems of reflexivity and dialectics in sociological inquiry, which was co-authored with Barry Sanduell and my PhD examiner, Maurice Roche. So it didn't quite, get over the bar, but my complaint really is that it was pushed into the functionalist paradigm, if we have to, accept these notions of paradigms, which I'm personally not convinced by. And I think, it was tarred by that brush. And then it was, I think, rather sort of shunted off into a siding, quite unjustifiably, where people said, oh, well, it's all that old, it's part of all that old functionalist nonsense. We don't really need to bother with it too much. And as I say, it's a shame that Gibson isn't here to defend this. One last point I will make is that if people haven't read it, do go and have a look at David's 1975 article, Accounts of Organizations, Organizational Structures, in inverted commas, and the Accounting Process. It's rather an obscure chapter in a book edited by John McKinley called Processing People. It's an excellent piece of work. It has stood the test of time brilliantly, and it's David's engagement of ethnomethodology alongside organization theory, notions of accounts of organizations. I think what David's done is to heighten our suspicion of reified structures to which some sort of need or agency is ascribed. And it's interesting how his work has been taken up so widely. So he's cited by Carl Weick, he's cited by Stuart Clegg, and even I found that there was an appearance in a book on Brezhnev's peace program, in which David's work is cited, which I doubt he even imagined that that might be possible when he was putting the final touches to the theory of organisations. Anyway, David, thanks so much for what you've done. It's much appreciated.